relapse, they won't get bad again. You can see the side effects here for this initial study were really quite high. 70% of patients on the placebo arm reported side effects. And that's because once you've taken oral iron the first time, you think all oral irons are going to be the same. So the placebo effect is very, very strong. Patients immediately think, well, I've got some, and remember these patients also had IBD, so they had gastro side effects anyway as a baseline, but they do report very strong side effects. And that may mean that over time, Ferrocru has a place to be used early on. As I said, one iron doesn't work, go back to the doctor. Second iron doesn't work, go back to the doctor. Use the one that's most tolerated and you avoid all that repeat need to go back and the costs in the healthcare system. The CKD study, the one that caused the precipitous fall, actually showed really just as good a result once we got it fully analysed. We met the primary endpoint, which was a rise in hemoglobin at 16 weeks, and we had statistical significance in that. We also saw the response being statistically significant at 8 weeks as well, and that was across all the analysis. Most important, I think, is that the changes in the iron parameters were virtually identical to what we saw in the IBD study. Although the hemoglobin response wasn't as high, the iron replenishment was almost identical. And that's important because these patients take up iron. But, as we talked about before, unless they've got EPO, they're not going to make red cells. And these are chronic kidney disease patients, and many of them don't have much EPO being formed. That's the first thing that they drop off. They stop making erythropoietin. So you can replenish their iron, but if they don't have EPO, they won't make red cells. So you don't get a rise in hemoglobin. So what this reflects, this slightly lower half a gram, just over half a gram rise, is the disease state of the patients, not the effect of the drug. The drug replenished iron. That's all it can do. These patients who aren't getting a hemoglobin rise may need to go on and dodge an exogenous EPO. They may need to have erythropoietin therapy. But we banned that in the study. But from a clinical perspective, having their iron replenishment means that if you do have to give erythropoietin, you know you're going to get your bang to the buck. Because it's just as bad to give erythropoietin when there's no iron. In fact, it causes problems. So, really strong study result. Exactly the same as we saw in the previous study. The patients who started did well on it. The patients who were on placebo and then rose did well on it as well. So they showed the same effects as they came off it. So a really strong study, and that's now in with the FDA for their consideration, as we've talked about in the past. And the head-to-head study, I'd like to be able to show you all the data, but I can't. It's going out to scientific review. We have to put it in the scientific review first, and that we'll be doing in the next little while. But we did have a non-inferiority confirmed in the study. Ferrocru did just as well in raising the hemoglobin to the responder rate as Ferinject, and that was statistically significant at 12 weeks. We had patients in this study that had hemoglobins down as low as 8. At the moment, we talk about 9.5 for the IBD population. This was down to 8, which takes in a considerably greater population, and was one that physicians were always worried about, is if I've got a lower hemoglobin, I really should use IV iron. Well, this dispels that. There's no benefit in using IV iron in that patient population, because Ferrocru does the job just as well. We have a 2.5 million development milestone, which came from Norgine on the back of this study. That was one of our critical endpoints of doing the study, showing that margin. We got that triggered. And now we're going to go into reimbursement. Two things that come from the study, and the things that I would look for when the data comes out, is firstly, the response is almost identical to what we saw in the first Aegis study again. So you're not seeing anything different in here in terms of the response to Ferrocru. And that's a natural thing. If you rely on the physiological response, you're going to get the same outcomes. It's a perfectly normal thing. And secondly, the 12-week data is us playing Ferinject there again. The optimum time to measure hemoglobin after using IV is at 12 weeks. It starts to drop off after that, right? And that's because you've got effectively a bucket with a hole in it. If you fill it up with a huge amount of water, it doesn't matter how much water you fill in, it can only fill up to this peak amount, and then it'll start to drain out immediately. And that's really what happens with IV. You give a massive amount of IV, it does what it can, and then it starts to drain out again, and later on you need to give more. So you get this up and down, and patients feel unwell. What you really want to look out for is how Therapeutics responds in the long term. Is once you've raised their hemoglobin, can you stop this up and down? Can you stop this repeated anemia treatment curve that these patients go through, and simply prevent iron deficiency anemia from occurring in the long term, because that's a real benefit to the patient. With that, Carl, I'll pass on to you to somebody else.
I think it's quite interesting what we're trying to achieve with Therapeutics, what all the other oral therapies try to do without their side effects. And I think about some other diseases as well, an analogy, almost in some way inverse. So think about patients who've got hypertension or high blood pressure. I cannot imagine a physician treating a patient with high blood pressure intermittently. And you would give them medication, tell them to go away for 3 months, take the medication for 3 months, then come back and let the disease recur and then treat them again. Or if you've got high cholesterol levels, strange lipid levels, all of those get chronic therapy to prevent the disease recurring. And that's all we are proposing really as the paradigm shift versus intravenous iron, which can, well, by definition, can only treat the patients intermittently, because you can't give IV iron every day. And you can't give it chronically. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so we licensed out to Norgine back in September last year. This obviously following what happened to us and a change of strategy, so that we realised that we would not be able to generate the capital and therefore have the manpower to create the share of voice that this product required in the marketplace. So we wanted a partner that wasn't too big, that they would have multiple products and therapy would just get thrown in the bag along with all the other things. But we also didn't want to license out to a company akin to Shield that wouldn't be able to put the effort behind it. So the list actually is not that long, and we only wanted to license Europe. We felt as though clearly we were under duress at that time, and we didn't want to give the crown jewels away, so to speak, with regard to the US and other markets. And Europe is quite a complicated market when it comes to reimbursement as well. Doesn't mean it's not attractive, it's just complicated. So we looked for partners that really would see this as a specialty product, a front and centre product for themselves. And after a range of discussions, we settled on Norgine. We took enough money up front from them, knowing how valuable this asset can be over the long term. We wanted to preserve the royalty levels as well. So we took enough money up front from them, so we got rid of all the issues we had, and also gave us money to have some comfort to play with, so to speak, and to give ourselves a runway. And then there's a significant amount of money available around milestones, both development and sales, and Mark's already touched on that we've already claimed the first development milestone. And that all helps effectively put Norgine in the red, so to speak, so that they've got to put the work in to get themselves into the black. So they're really driven to make a success of this commercially. And I think really industry-leading royalties here, so we've got royalties of up to 40%, and actually for a single asset company, I sort of struggle from a standing start to be able to justify building a commercial team when you have royalties of 40%. It's a very fine line, with clearly none of the risks that we would have as a single asset business, so to speak. So I've talked on why Norgine. I think it's really interesting to see the number of reps they've got. So at our peak we had about 20 people. We were obviously trying to grow from there, but then we hit the buffers. They already have more than 80 people just in the UK and Germany selling Therapeutics. So we really hope that will then feed through to the share of voice, knocking on more doors, having more conversations, all the things that lead to more sales. However, we retain a number of really important features. So we manufacture the drug actually through a third party, or two third parties. But we maintain responsibility for manufacture and supply. We control all aspects of current and future development. We have an absolute veto on all development issues. So Norgine will want to do lots of phase 4 studies to increase the marketing opportunity. And they will pay for all of those studies, but they only get to do them if we say so, and we've got to look at this on a global basis as well as a local basis. So that was really, as Theresa May would say, a red line. I used to say line in the sand.
Funny thing is, we got our red lines through.
Yeah. And also, critically, we retain all aspects of intellectual property management. So again, it's up to us. And interest in the Norgine transaction allows us to charge the royalty rates on whilst there is IP ongoing in Europe. So it's not just the IP that and the time frames that were in existence at the time of the deal. It's also, if we do add additional IP and extend the IP further, we continue to benefit. And critically, we've retained the rights everywhere else. So what about the US? And we've talked about the attractiveness of the US already. So we submitted the NDA back in September, and then we had acceptance of that filing. It's been misleading to me. The FDA accepted the NDA. Oh, we're off for review in December. It's a bit of a weird, I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before, it's a bit of a weird experience, this. Again, especially when it's your absolutely your core asset. So day 60 after the submission, FDA make a decision as to whether they're going to adopt the application for review. But helpfully, they don't tell you unless they've decided not to. And then they stick a letter in the post. So they don't talk to you on the phone, and you're left in this limbo, unless you can find a way out of finding out about it, until day 74, when if you then get a letter telling you they've adopted it, and they give you the PDUFA date. So it's a bit like waiting for your A-level results. You know, it's just awful. And that shows how bad it is, because they were a long time ago for me. And that all leads us to the PDUFA date of the 27th of July. So that's the date by which they will tell us, hopefully sooner, but by the 27th of July. And as you would expect, having taken the decision to go down a licensing route or a partnering route, we are actively looking at commercial options for the US now. And if the process works the way we hope, one would expect that we would line up a short list of attractive partners, and then post the positive opinion of the agency, there would be a short additional process to finalise that. So I wouldn't expect us to proactively find a licensing partner and announce something this side of the NDA. If somebody comes over the top, then there's not a lot we can do about that, then so be it. But our plan is to not have to deal with lots of contingent value and take the risk out so we can maximise the opportunity post the NDA. Financial highlights. So we had revenues obviously mainly driven by the licensing deal with Norgine. Actually, what was very interesting with Therapeutics in 2018 is we took the sales teams and all commercial support out the first week of February, and yet sales of Therapeutics continued to increase throughout the year. Now, what we didn't see was lots of new prescribers because we didn't have the reach to get to them, but in the centres that were already prescribing it, they continued to and increase their prescription rates. And I think that shows the real stickiness, the real attractiveness of this product to prescribers and patients alike. Everybody expected this drug would just fall off the cliff probably after about 2 or 3 months of withdrawing commercial support. It just didn't happen. Small loss for the year, boosted a little bit by some accounting rules. We've booked revenues for 2019, I think it is, 2018 for R&D tax credits, because we've now had a number of years where we've been able to claim R&D tax credits. So from an auditing perspective, it's taken as expected that we put an application in, we'll get the R&D tax credit. Whereas previously, we've waited until we've got it. And a relatively healthy cash balance. Our burn rate's pretty low now compared to where we were, and that's been supplemented obviously by the money that's coming in from Norgine for the milestone. So, what about the rest of 2019? So clearly growth expected with all of the reps that are now supporting Therapeutics through Norgine and our other partners. We don't expect significant traction outside of those markets where it's already reimbursed, but the head-to-head data will clearly help that reimbursement process in those markets which are very much price-giving rather than price-taking. And I think specifically of Italy, France and Spain as the big drivers of that. So hopefully much more commercial traction from those markets in 2020 onwards. I touched on the receivable from Norgine. We've reduced our G&A and our cost base generally. Similar R&D, we are running a phase 3 paediatric study which starts this year, which is a commitment as part of our paediatric investigational plan agreement with the European regulators. However, this study proactively will also deal with the NDA requirements. and that will be a similar indication to that which we see in Europe in adults now, so it would be an all-comers indication. Pretty obvious the big things for us this year, so the PDUFA date is front and centre, as you can imagine, within the organisation. It starts with the clinical trial in paediatrics. We've already got some very interesting data in peds, which is PK-related data, but very encouraging about how children uptake this drug as well. And broader out-licensing opportunities, not just the US. I think I've stated in our prelims, I've been quite specific about focusing on China as well, and that's progressing well. I will say that those things are how long is a piece of string, so they get done when they get done. So, takeaway messages before we go into Q&A. So we're a highly focused commercial stage business, really driven around the opportunity of the Ferret Group, which I believe can provide a paradigm shift. It can take treatment of iron deficiency back to where it should be, not to where it's got to with intravenous ions. It's a rapidly growing market, and I think we have a product that it's just really novel. Comfortably, our cash position is relatively comfortable, going out through 2020, and that forecast doesn't include any of the milestones we would expect from any other licensing deals, and really it assumes minimal royalties from Norgine. So hopefully that provides a level of comfort, and clearly valuation upside. So not just Ferret Group though, we've talked a lot about Ferret Group. The money that we took from Norgine, the Norgine license deal last year, has also allowed us to restart our efforts around PT20, so the treatment of hyperphosphatemia. And this is not an insubstantial market. So since we took a break with PT20, which is really around the time we went public, there's been 2 products licensed in that space, and both of them now have almost exclusively US sales. Both of them are already on run rates north of 100 million. So, and we believe we have a product that, by design, can provide significant advantages over those other 2. So that's an opportunity for us as well. Okay, thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
I've got loads of questions, well I'll stick to 2. First one is a simple one, relatively speaking. So what about Japan? You haven't mentioned Japan, 3rd biggest market. Have you got a plan for Japan?
Yep, so I'll take that one.
Yeah, that's simple to answer. The other one's a bit more complicated.
So the reimbursement market for oral products for iron deficiency in Japan is very complex and actually is very low. Frankly, what we're waiting for is Fair-Inject to get reimbursed in Japan, and then we'll follow in with work in Japan.
But you have to do a trial in Japan?
Likely, yes. Yeah. We'll need some exposure to Asian populations, and up until now we haven't had the financial capability to do that, but really commercially there's not been a rationale for it. On V4's latest presentations, they're suggesting they may have reimbursement in Japan second half of this year, so we'll see how that goes.
Right. Second one, a bit more left field. So, potential commercial issue in the US, which I have personal experience of. So, doctors in the US, and this is in Crohn's, so directly relevant to you, doctors in the US like to have a procedure, so we're talking about the IV, because they get reimbursed for the procedure. And in fact, the drug I worked on, we reintroduced an old formulation which required mixing, and they could charge $50 for, and that was a massive commercial success, just because they wanted to use it, which is dreadful, but it's true. So, is that potential in the US in comparison with the IV one, where they'll be getting $150 or whatever it is for doing the procedure?
It's an interesting question, actually, and it's not just in the US. So you have a situation in the UK as well, where hospitals can generate revenue from the use of intravenous ions. So clearly, for Therapeutics, eventually, it's going to end up. One of the benefits of Therapeutics is it'll end up within primary care, and there's far less desire then to use preferential therapies and invasive therapies. In the US, and Mark might want to add to this as well, but in the US, I think what we found from our ad boards and various discussions is that was when we first started, I think that was potentially a relevant issue, but with the requirements of the regulators for these drugs to be given where there are crash facilities available, individual physicians are often now far less willing to administer IV therapies, especially those that cause anaphylaxis because of the risk of being sued if they don't have the appropriate facilities. So the one reason you tend to now see, especially in GI, but also in CKD, particularly pre-dialysis CKD, they will push their patients off to specialist infusion clinics because they just don't want to carry the risk. And then secondly, this drug is so different. It will provide such a significant step change in benefit to these patients that in the end the physicians will be driven by the benefit that their patients derive, and it will be hard for them to go the other way because it is so different and the data is so black and white. And I think the head-to-head data will really support that. Mark, maybe you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I worked on equals in the past with the same effect. We were stunned that in America most of them are given IV, whereas in Europe a lot of them are given subcutaneously at home by the patients. But it was for exactly the same reason. Yeah. But as Carl said, having spoken to, in the renal setting, for instance, you speak to them and they say, we just don't want to do it. It's too much hassle. My insurance premium, if I want to give these things, is massive, so I don't do it. So money drives it. But it's good to hear there's always some clinical things as well, which is, in renal patients, you don't want to be damaging their veins at all because of the risk that they're going to progress, they're going to go down to end-stage renal disease, need dialysis, you need good veins, you need good access. So they are very reluctant to use IV. And actually, we see in the study, when you go to these clinics, a lot of these patients are walking around grey because their hemoglobins are allowed to get down to 8, 9, 10, or down to 8. And they do it slowly so they don't notice it, but they're not actively treated. The oral treatment gives them that chance to not risk them because they're not given the EPOs that allow them to get to their best natural hemoglobin they can. So yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's where when we look for partners, we're looking for people who've got experience so that they understand not a simple commercial model, but the complexities that are in the US and how to manage those, because they're arbitrary.
There's another interesting point about that as well. So talking to the likes of DaVita or Fresenius, who manage the dialysis population in the US, I think those two companies manage about 75–80% of the dialysis population, so about 300,000, 350,000 patients. Actually, they can see a benefit, a commercial benefit for themselves for the use of therapy in those patients because they get paid about $88,000 per year per patient for dialysis patients, and that covers everything. And that includes delivering all the IV iron therapy that these patients get. If you give them oral iron, and you give them an efficacious one, which the guidelines say you should give them anyway, you give them a product that's added, they can, first of all, they can acquire at a cheaper price than IV, and secondly, it doesn't carry the nursing time, etc. So it actually increases their margins somewhat. Or even better than that, from a DaVita Fresenius perspective, is it's not included in the bundle, so it becomes a copay for the patient. So if you're not a patient who's on one of the two main US schemes, you're a private payer patient, that will come out of your insurance separately.
Thank you.
Carl, can I just make a point to reinforce what Mark said? It was my experience on this. With IV iron, the patient always has to go back for more IV iron every 4 to 6 months. This is the question. Now, that actually has a big effect on the costs in the hospital, not just the product, but actually getting in to actually get the IV iron. Now, the great thing about Therapeutics is correct and maintain, and eventually, that's the language I would use, eventually that would then come down to working repeat prescriptions with the GP. And therefore, the margins and the product should wipe out IV iron in my book.
It'll our expectation, or hope I should say, is that it'll do to blood transfusions what IV iron did. It will do to IV iron, what IV iron did to blood transfusions, and marginalise it.
Yes, I do have several restricted to 2, like Andrew did. Switzerland, why is that such a large market? I can see it was launched in 2008, but there were some other, so it's been going a long time, but there's other markets which were launched about then as well, and they haven't done quite so well.
I mean, it's their home market, it's Vifor's home market.
Okay.
And I think the message that Vifor are now carrying forward, and I think it's to our advantage actually, is that Vifor have cornered the market. They've done very well on managing the low hemoglobins. You want to treat that, use IV rather than use blood transfusion. But of course that's a relatively small